And welcome into a special edition of Hoopsville on this Wednesday, February 8th. The first regional rankings have been released, and we have them here on the men's side. We are still waiting for the women. Forgive the camera if you're watching, wondering what's going on. It's a little bit more finicky, a little bit maybe less quality. That is the case. Our main camera has failed us. That's why we were a little bit delayed getting on the air here this afternoon. So our backup camera is up and running. We will try and alleviate whatever problems we have here shortly. But if you listen to this as a podcast, we are turning this around as a podcast. Thank you for tuning in. So we're going to be going over the first regional rankings of the season in men's basketball. The women's regional rankings are not up as of yet, from the best we can tell. We are still waiting for them, but the men's rankings are live, and we will be going through those at least to start with, and then go from there. We also have the information that obviously is important regarding SOS numbers and whatnot. If you got questions for us, you can always tweet us at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. You can always also email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. Those are going to be the easiest ways to interact with us. We do have a chat room on our Facebook page, but I'll freely admit that is a little bit more difficult than we normally have to control or to follow. So we will be talking about regional rankings, the first ones. Let's remember a few things about said regional rankings. First and foremost, some of the criteria isn't able to be used. That isn't because they didn't want to use it. It's because, for example, items like results versus regionally ranked opponents is simply not available. That is kind of quid pro quo for the first week, basically because we don't have the ability to see them, there's no regional rankings to be had, as it were. So we kind of can't really justify or be able to use that criteria. And I say we, I am certainly talking about the NCAA regional committees and national committee. Each region has a regional committee, 8 of them on the men's and women's sides, 16 total, and then 2 national committees, men's and women's. The men's led by Kevin Vandestreek, head coach at Calvin. We have talked to him twice on Hoopsville, once at the very beginning of the season and once on the Hoopsville Marathon nearly a week ago. The women are led by Bobby Morgan, head coach at Haverford. Talked to her at the beginning of the season. Unfortunately, have not had a chance to catch back up with her. Usually they may share a tidbit or two here and there, and if we get those, we will find out what they have had to say about the first regional rankings. A couple other items to keep in mind about these regional rankings as well. For the most part, they're a good barometer, a good toe in the water, see what the temperature is, all of that stuff. They really don't mean a hill of beans after that fact. And I mean that because nothing against them, but we used to have results versus regionally ranked opponents for only the ranking that had just happened. Then we went to once ranked, always ranked. And then the first regional rankings had a lot of pull. That has changed to now only the last 2 weeks of regional rankings. Week 2 and 3 matter. So week 1's more about, okay, where do we stand? What do our SOS officially number officially look like from the NCAA's point of view? And who do we think now may be in trouble? It does not mean that's how it will end. There's a lot of teams that have risen in rankings before because teams ahead of them have lost. There are teams at the high that will lose and will come down. And also a reminder, these are through Sunday's games. So anything that's taken place, case in point, Wesleyan beating Amherst last night does not play a factor here. And we will certainly get to that a little bit. For example, Amherst is number 3 in the Northeast rankings. Wesleyan is number 5. I believe Wesleyan has now beaten them twice. So that would, certainly, and we have to look at the other criteria, give an opportunity for Wesleyan to move ahead of Amherst at the next regional rankings. But that win on Tuesday is not reflected in these regional rankings. So keep that in mind as we move forward on this show. Not sure how long we'll be on air. Certainly not a very long time. We are on air via Facebook and YouTube. So feel free to ask questions. We will certainly try and keep track of questions that may come in on Facebook, though I'll freely admit it is far more difficult. We will also try and keep track of what's going on YouTube, and that will certainly be more difficult. So what we do suggest is email us or tweet us Again, that information at the bottom of your screen. Email is hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Twitter is at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. I know a colleague of mine has said he's available via phone, and we may take you up on that, Wags, but let's get through the rankings as it were. And again, we have not heard from the women as of yet. We are keeping an eye out for that to see when their rankings are posted. Their rankings as of literally, I just hit refresh, have not been posted. We're not sure. Women tend to be delayed for whatever reason. I don't know the real reason, but anyway, we'll go on from there. All right, so let's talk about these regional rankings. Barring any questions, we'll just start in the order the NCAA has given them to us, and we'll start in the Atlantic region. I think there's no surprise here. Newman is the highest ranked team here with one loss. That doesn't shock me too much. Their SOS is also a 512, so it's not wonderful, but it's about middle of the pack or at least above 500. So at 20-1. No surprise there. Ramapo is 20-2 with a 486 SOS. That is immediately not going to be able to beat Newman, even though with 2 losses and a lower SOS. You can go to Cabrini. Cabrini is 16-4 according to the eyes of the NCAA, 16-5 overall. Their SOS is a 524. Certainly better than Newman's, but again, with 4 losses, you're not going to trump them. I think what we're really going to get into here is TCNJ and New Jersey City. New Jersey City, certainly a good team, highly ranked. TCNJ not ranked in the top 25. And again, that criteria means nothing in the grand scheme of things. New Jersey City's at 483 on the SOS. At least their SOS has come up a little bit. TCNJ is 528. So right then and there, we're already starting to forecast maybe if everything were to stay even here. And let's just say TCNJ and New Jersey City each pick up another loss before the end of the season, and we're assuming in the NJAC tournament. TCNJ is in a far better position to get into the tournament than New Jersey City. One would argue New Jersey City may be the better team when they play each other, but right now I believe the season is 1-1, so it may come down to if they play each other in the conference tournament. So New Jersey City may have one more loss, but their SOS difference is .04. And if anybody remembers what we have discussed over the last 3 years is .03 difference in the SOS, the committee will equate that to 2 games. So since New Jersey City's SOS is .04 better than New Jersey City's, they will kind of change New Jersey City. And now New Jersey City's got 7 losses and TCNJ has 4. We've automatically just moved New Jersey City into a worse position. So that's why New Jersey City, with one more loss, is sitting behind TCNJ. And by the way, we haven't gotten to anything else. We looked at head-to-head. They're 1-1. We have not looked at any other criteria. Common opponents, for example, is going to play a factor here as well. Now, New Jersey City has a win over Ramapo, for example. I don't remember TCNJ, but I don't think it's going to trump the difference there in the SOS and the win-loss percentage. New Jersey City with one more win, one less loss, but isn't enough, I don't feel, to trump that SOS number. DeSales at 15-6, and you're looking at DeSales with an SOS of a 527. Again, certainly much higher. We're going to steal a tweet here. Out of the Great Lakes region, we're just diabolical like that. Nothing against our friends, but if we can help out, we're going to help out. The Great Lakes, certainly one of those other ones that we are watching, because I think it's fascinating to see what's going on there. It's not as cut and dry, I don't think, as people may think it is. I think it's a little bit tricky to really read into and understand, but we'll get to the Great Lakes. So, DeSales, again, a 527 with a 15-6. You might wonder, okay, so why is New Jersey City ahead of them versus DeSales? They've got about a difference of that same difference there. And now we're getting into that extra criteria. Now we're talking about other results, for example, and let's just call up, since we're in that conversation, the Atlantic region. Let's call up New Jersey City. Where are they here? Here they are. So New Jersey City, did not play DeSales this season, so we don't have that. They do have a win over TCNJ and a loss over TCNJ, as we mentioned. So you're probably wondering, okay, so why is DeSales maybe behind New Jersey City? Probably a fair argument. DeSales has a stronger SOS. They do have one more loss than New Jersey City, but 2 less wins. And there's a chance, and I don't know for sure without talking to some people, that washed out the advantage on the SOS. That win difference there may have wiped out because there was a difference of close to a .03, a little bit more than that, between the two SOSs, and that's those 2 games right there. And so there's a good chance that DeSales kind of lost out maybe, or at least wiped that out. If they have common opponents, and I don't have that immediately in front of me, they're going to look at common opponents. I'll see if I can quickly find some common opponents for New Jersey City and DeSales. Quickly, I don't see a ton of them. Interestingly enough, DeSales did not play any NJAC schools this year. So you don't have any of the NJACs that you can jump into and make some comparisons with. Honestly, I don't see any common opponents quickly off the top. We have Misericordia. That may be a... Yep, so Misericordia, DeSales lost to Misericordia on January 21st, and they've got one more game up against them, whereas New Jersey City defeated Misericordia. So you now have at least an advantage to New Jersey City in that scenario. It may be trumped on February 14th should DeSales be able to win against Misericordia in their conference action. I don't think there's any other games that I can see outside of that. So this may be coming down to New Jersey City maybe being a wash with DeSales according to SOS and win-loss percentage. And so the win over Misericordia now becomes a factor, and that is playing a role. And that's why I suspect New Jersey City's ahead of DeSales. Rowan is sneaking in here, and that's interesting at 14-8. They have that win over Ramapo. So, at least you have a common opponent. Not a regionally ranked opponent. That doesn't play in right now, and I think that's playing a factor. And Staten Island's getting in there now. Staten Island's SOS is pretty good. Not great. We'll certainly take a look at that SOS. Let's see here. Whoop, I thought I had it. Let's see. Here we go. So the SOS for Staten Island is a 493, actually, so it's a little lower than I thought it was going to be. Their conference is not helping them. Staten Island tried to better their SOS and better their out-of-conference, and I think they certainly did their best. 17-5, though, and, of course, outside of their conference, they don't have a lot of wins, and so that's going to hurt Staten Island just a little bit. So I think that's kind of where we have a lot of this kind of breaking down. Though I will admit that bottom half of the Atlantic, I think, is just a little bit more interesting than other scenarios so far. So that's what we've got so far in the Atlantic. When we go to the Central region, this one certainly, we're jumping all over the country just a little bit here. This one's going to get just a wee bit more interesting as well. You got River Falls on top at 17-2, Wash U at 17-3. These are in-region records, remember, through Sunday. Then Whitewater at 3rd, Augustana 4, Eau Claire 5, Benedictine 6, 7 is North Park, and 8 is Illinois Wesleyan. The first thing I take from this is this. The CCIW's in trouble. They may not get an extra bid out of the CCIW this season. Now, granted, the first regional rankings in the grand scheme of things don't mean a hill of beans. However, they can at least give us an idea of what might be going on. And the CCIW, with Augustana sitting 4 and North Park 7, Illinois Wesleyan 8, could be in trouble. I'm not basing that on anything more than what I'm seeing here. Augustana's SOS, not stellar, about a 5.18 according to the NCAA. Nothing really to write home about. It's adequate. Benedictine, by the way, at 5.11, which is certainly better than it's been in the past. This is why we're seeing so many Wisconsin schools, whereas last year, remember, we only got one at large from Wisconsin, from the WIAC, and I think we're seeing the flip of that now. Go down to North Park, and North Park's problem is losses. North Park on an SOS is a 5.25, but with 5 regional losses. They're parked behind Benedictine because basically there isn't a big enough wash there to get that difference of 3 games to jump North Park over Benedictine. And that stinks for North Park, who has kind of put themselves in a tough bind here. They have lost a bunch of games as of late. They're 6-4 since we started 2017. They are 3-3 in their last 6, including a loss to North Central on Saturday. In earlier action this season, nothing jumps out at me as, there's no head-to-heads necessarily with Benedictine, or there isn't an SOS or a head-to-head there, so that's why that's playing out. Illinois Wesleyan, for example, is 14-6 or 6-5 in the conference, and Illinois Wesleyan's SOS is a 556. So Illinois Wesleyan's got a really solid SOS, but it can't overcome North Park because there's only a game difference, and the 556 to Benedictine might be the only argument here, but Benedictine's got 4-win advantage in a 3-loss deficit. I suspect they wiped those out. You then can go to Illinois Wesleyan's season this year and look for common opponents, certainly in this case. They did not play Benedictine this year. We're going to have to see if we can find some common opponents with Benedictine. But I think what the CCIW has to realize here is any more losses and they're in even deeper trouble to get in that large bid. I really think they're in a bit of trouble. Benedictine so far in region has a loss to North Central. Well, so does North Park. And Illinois Wesleyan has a loss to North Central as well. Actually, they haven't played them the second time. North Park for Illinois Wesleyan, they've lost to them twice. So there's a big reason why North Park is ahead of Illinois Wesleyan, for example, even though they're tight and Illinois Wesleyan has a much better SOS. Again, River Falls, not surprising to be on top, though I'm sure some people would love to compare them to Wash U, and we'll certainly do that. If we go to the Central region and we go to Wash U, and we look at their SOS, Wash U's SOS is a 586. So obviously we're going to have to take into account a few things here. River Falls' SOS is a 604. 604 River Falls. For anybody who follows Division 3, you are anywhere near 600, have an outstanding SOS. If you're over 600, you almost start wondering if it's been overinflated or maybe a false SOS. But River Falls' SOS is the reason, and one less loss, that they're trumping Wash U. If you look at Whitewater's SOS is at 556. So similar to Illinois Wesleyan's, for example, with 3 more wins and 3 less losses than Illinois Wesleyan. So no surprise here at the top, 1, 2, and 3. I don't see the surprise. I think Augustana, and we can look at Eau Claire to see if maybe why they're not ahead of Augustana. Eau Claire is 572 SOS to Augustana's 518. I'm quickly calling up Augustana's to see if we have a head-to-head. I can't have all these schedules memorized. I do not have a head-to-head, but we do have a ton of common opponents. So certainly common opponents comes into play here. Augustana also has a loss to Wash U. So a lot going on, as you can see, in the Central region. My initial reaction is this is all good. I don't see a major problem here off the top of my head or anything that's crazy. Got a question from someone who wants to stay anonymous. That's certainly fine. When you say record versus regional, ranked versus regional will change next week, does that mean only if you play some of these teams going forward, or you look back at the entire season? Said another way, will teams get credit for beating RRO earlier in the season? Absolutely. Your results versus regionally ranked opponents is based on any time you played them. Remember, a game November 15th is just as important as a game on February 15th or February 26th. So if you play a team who is regionally ranked, your result against them is weighted. Now, results versus regional rankings do not count right now. And the reason they do not count right now is because we haven't had rankings yet. So when they put these first regional rankings together, they had no rankings to look at. Yes, they did a mock ranking last week, but that's not what counts. So when they look at Newman, they can't say, okay, hey, they've had 3 games against regionally ranked opponents, because we don't have regionally ranked opponents yet. Now the first week sets those regional rankings, and it sets those regional ranked opponents. So moving forward, now we can look at the fact that Wash U may have results versus regionally ranked opponents. Case in point, they have played Rochester, so they will have results. And actually next week, they will have 2 results versus Rochester and anybody else who is regionally ranked. You do not need to play a team moving forward on the regional rankings. It is just if you have played a team who is regionally ranked. I hope that makes sense. So if you are regionally ranked, or your opponent is regionally ranked and you played them on November 15th, totally fine. If you have nobody regionally ranked and next week they become regionally ranked, then the following week your result against them will count. Here's the trick. If they fall out of the regional rankings after this week, they have to get back in them the third week or they will not matter. And that's where we used to have it only based on the previous week. So right now, week 2 would be based on week 1, week 3 would be based on week 2, and the final ones would be based on week 3. Then we went to a once ranked, always ranked, which meant it didn't matter if you were ranked the first, second, third, or fourth week, did not matter. At the end of the season, you had a result versus a team that was ranked at some point. Now we have gone to a hybrid of that. You have to be ranked in week 2 and week 3 to count as a result versus a regionally ranked opponent at the end. At the end. Next week, we'll still look at week 1 to see who is regionally ranked and have results versus regionally ranked opponents. So we have like 5 primary criteria. We're not even using one right now, but next week the committee will go, okay, so Newman, who have they played that's regionally ranked? Ramapo, who have they played who is regionally ranked? And what are those results? And that's where that becomes a factor. So I hope that made sense. If not, email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. That's hoopsville at d3hoops.com. You can also tweet us at d3hoopsville or use the hashtag hoopsville. We're keeping track, and I don't see any questions as of yet on Twitter, but we will keep an eye. I'm browsing through Facebook and YouTube where we're streaming just to see if anybody pops up questions there. Usually they don't, which is perfectly fine. I just want to make sure that we don't miss something if necessary. Let's see here. Just checking to see if we got any more questions. I do not see them, so hopefully there aren't any. The trick with this is sometimes that we just don't see a question when we're on Facebook Live. As great as they say you can interact with your friends on Facebook Live, you really can't. Whoa, maybe we have. Let's see here. When do we expect women? Well, to be honest with you, we can expect women at any point. Going in now to see if women have popped up yet. They have not. The women rankings have not popped up. I see someone's in there answering questions, so that is certainly helpful. Thank you very much. St. Norbert not in the regional rankings in the Central region. That is maybe a little bit of a surprise. Let's look at St. Norbert's SOS. It is a 488, and they're 16-3. I mean, let's compare them directly to Wash U since they're right below them at 17-3, 586. So you're not going to get them in over Wash U. Wash U's got a full 0.1 against them on SOS, which is shockingly huge. So you can't do it there. So I think St. Norbert's 3 losses are hurting them here. Also, remember, we've adjusted these regional rankings a little bit as well. So I think that's playing a factor here. Hold on a second. Another message. So yeah, I think St. Norbert's an interesting equation here. Their SOS being below 500 and everybody else's, I believe, was above 500, right, in the regional ranking. So hard to say that makes sense that St. Norbert should be in because everybody else has above 500 SOSs. I mean, Illinois Wesleyan's 14-6 with a 570 something SOS, was it? Let's see here. Yeah, 556 SOS to a 486 SOS. And a difference of 3 losses. You're not going to get St. Norbert in over that number. North Park with an SOS of a 525 versus a 486. Again, not going to get in over that number. The only one you could possibly have an argument with is Benedictine at 18-3. Their SOS is a 511. It's now within that .03, but now you don't have the win-loss difference. So I don't see how St. Norbert gets into this conversation. What this does say, and I think St. Norbert's been in this boat before, and they have been in this boat before, you're going to probably have to win to get in. I don't see that large bid coming to St. Norbert at any point this time. Now, I think their SOS will move up a little bit. What's interesting is yesterday we had the announcement that Grinnell has had to forfeit a bunch of games. Granted, that doesn't affect St. Norbert because they beat them, but any of the Grinnell wins now have become forfeits. I do wonder how that affects St. Norbert's SOS for teams that had losses to Grinnell. Now they don't have a loss, but they don't have a win. I think the SOS might be boosted up. Now, that decision came out yesterday, so I don't know if that affects the SOS this week or for this ranking. So we'll have to watch to see if St. Norbert moves into the rankings tomorrow. I think that's going to be really interesting for St. Norbert. So we'll try and keep an eye on questions that you may have, and we'll try and answer them the best of our ability here on the show. It's a one-man band. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? If you got more questions, again, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com, or tweet us, etc. Question, let's see. Gwen and Mercy beat Staten Island, as did Cabrini, and isn't ranked. Please explain. All right. We'll go back to the Atlantic region here, and we'll go into Gwen and Mercy's rankings. Gwen and Mercy, oops, I'm in the wrong one. Here we go. Gwen and Mercy is 17-4 with a 492 SOS. Let's compare him to Staten Island. Staten Island is a 17-5 with a 493 with a head-to-head win going in Gwen and Mercy's favor. The SOS, I think, is a wash in this case. 493 is better than 492 by the scantest of margins. So let's wash that out. Gwen and Mercy does have a win over Staten Island. So you would think Gwen and Mercy will be in. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to jump over here. We're going to call up... let's see if we can do a comparison with these two teams and see if we can figure out. And it's the first week. There's a very good chance. By the way, I would argue Gwen and Mercy is probably sitting right on the doorstep there of being ranked. I'm not 100% positive why they aren't ranked, but we'll see if we can find something else here in the Atlantic region. So Gwen and Mercy and Staten Island. Well, wait. When did they play Staten Island? I don't have them playing Staten Island. So Gwen and Mercy does not have a game against Staten Island. So maybe I misread the email. Let me get back to that. As far as our game against Cabrini, Gwen and Mercy lost to Cabrini. I'm going to double check this question. Gwen and Mercy beat Staten Island, as did Cabrini, and isn't ranked. I do not have a game of Gwen and Mercy playing Staten Island. So that's why it doesn't count. Now, Cabrini did beat Staten Island. And if we look at the regional rankings in the Atlantic, Cabrini not ranked. No, Cabrini's ranked number 3. So yeah, I don't see a reason Gwen and Mercy should be ranked. Their numbers are identical to Staten Island's. Pretty much. They have one less loss. Staten Island has one more loss. The SOSs are even. I'm sure they went to maybe some common opponents. Common opponents would be Cabrini, and Cabrini's beaten both teams as of right now. Staten Island. Let's see if there's I don't see. Let's see if there's another common opponent maybe. Well, there's Newman. Cabrini lost to Newman. I don't know. Staten Island didn't play Newman. I'm not. No, a lot of common opponents are not jumping out at me right now, and maybe I'm just missing them. But yeah, they may have been splitting hairs. It may have gotten to some data that we can't see. Oh, apologies. No problem. Got me thinking, at least. Got me thinking. Got some notes from the men's committee. We'll go through them in a bit and see if there's anything we can give you as far as insight. See if there's any more questions from you, the fans. We're on Facebook Live, and we're also on D3 or YouTube, obviously. So if you have questions, we will certainly be trying to answer those at the best of our ability. Again, email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Tweet us at D3Hoopsville. One person is alluding to the fact that maybe the Rack didn't want to shut out the Cuniac in the first week. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. That's an interesting theory. And that's very possible. Again, week 1 doesn't really matter, so maybe Staten Island is being thrown in there since they're hedging the bets. I mean, at this point, everything I see between Staten Island and Gwen and Mercy makes them even. So maybe Staten Island is just getting the nod for this week. since this week doesn't matter a whole hill of beans, as it were. CNU looks good. Seen him up close. Marty, I've seen him as well. Though at the beginning of the season, I would like to see if maybe I can see him later in the season. We shall see. But Christopher Newport is good. They're down in the Mid-Atlantic region, and they're obviously no surprise number one regionally ranked team. Thinking ahead out west, do you think Whitman will get a chance to host the first 2 rounds of the tournament, maybe get a bye? If they remain unbeaten and beat Whitworth again in the conference tourney, especially if CMS wins the tournament. Daryl, I'm going to bust your bubble, buddy. We have 64 teams on the men's side now. There is no more byes in Division III men's basketball. That is gone. We got some more questions. Cool. So Whitman's in position to host. I don't think they will jump Claremont Mudd Scripps, or Claremont Mudd Scripps would beat them. Whitman's number 1 in the region, so certainly they're going to be hosting unless something crazy happens with Claremont Mudd Scripps, who's sitting down in 5. Whitworth is sitting 2, though not a strong 2, because Whitman's got 2 wins over them. They've got 3 wins in region over them on top of that. Granted, 2 of them being in conference or against each other. If we look at the West region and we go down to Whitman, their SOS is a 541. I'm sorry, a 548. Whitworth is a 541. So for all intents and purposes, even with a Whitworth win over Whitman in the tournament, I'm pretty confident Whitman will host out there. The only thing is if they implode and Claremont Mudd Scripps comes out of nowhere to maybe jump them, granted they'd be coming out of 5th. I think that's a bit of a tall order. Claremont Mudd Scripps also has a 461 SOS. So I don't see a reason right now that Whitman isn't in the driver's seat. So that they'll host the first weekend. The trick will be, well, it gets dicey, but there are no byes. So Whitman will host. Most likely, should Whitworth make it, and according to this, they're in good position to make it. They just can't keep imploding. If Whitworth were to make it, Whitworth and Whitman are going to play a 4th time in the second weekend. There is just I don't see any scenario where the committee is going to be allowed to send Whitworth somewhere else. It doesn't have to be Claremont Mudd Scripps up there because Claremont Mudd Scripps is a flight. They're going to have to send 2 teams to Whitman. Now, I'm saying it's a flight. I should probably double check that to make sure Whitman and Claremont Mudd Scripps are not further away from each other than I think they are. Let's just confirm it. Yeah, 1,000 miles. That's what I thought. So, yeah, I think Whitman is probably going to, we probably can tell from this that they're going to host that opening weekend unless something implodes. Claremont Mudd Scripps doesn't have to go there. Claremont Mudd Scripps can go anywhere. They can go to Texas. They can go to the East Coast. They can go anywhere the committee wants to send them. They are out on their own unless for some crazy reason they get in as an at-large, and so does another SCIAC team. But even then, despite those teams being nearby to each other, they're still going to have to ship both those teams. And a trip up to Whitman is going to cost essentially the same as a trip to Chicago or Illinois or to Texas or wherever. So Claremont Mudd Scripps is going to go somewhere. They don't have to go to the West Coast. They always went to the West Coast and stayed on the West Coast because you had that bye, and it's easier with them on the West Coast to have that Thursday-Saturday scenario. We don't have that anymore. It's Friday, Saturday for everybody. There are no byes, so it's wide open with what they can do with Claremont Mudd Scripps, which also means we have to send 2 teams to Whitman no matter what. And maybe we get some diversity here, and we see some teams travel a little bit further. The men's bracket is going to be different for the first time in that sense. The trick's going to be Texas. We can look at the South region, for example. Guilford's number 1 regionally ranked. I'm not surprised. Despite a subpar SOS, Guilford being number 1 does not surprise me. Concordia, Hardin, Simmons then are 2 and 3. Virginia Wesleyan, then Laterno, then Emory. We're shaping up here that maybe just 2 Texas teams, which means either 2 teams get shipped to Texas or those Texas teams get shipped out. And there's a very good chance if you get 2 Texas teams in that those are the teams that will fly to Whitman. Because that's just 2 flights versus a 3rd flight to send somebody different to Whitman. Claremont Mudd Scripps already has to fly, so that's guaranteed 3 flights if in that scenario. So that being said, they can keep the 2 Texas teams there as well and make a pot out of that and fly 2 teams in there and 2 teams, but that's 4 now. So now we get a little tricky. This is where the flight scenario really becomes scenario. But granted, these regional rankings will change. But no, I think Whitman's got almost a lock at hosting the opening weekend, unless they implode between now and the end of the season. Almost a lock at hosting the opening weekend. However, we got to make sure that the women are not in a scenario where Whitman women may host, and the regional ranking for women are out. And I'm going to quickly look at the West. Whitman's 5th. Puget Sound is 2, so most likely Puget, and no surprise here, most likely Puget Sound will host, which will give, and by the way, if you are a Whitman men's basketball fan, you are a fan of Puget Sound right now. Nothing against your women's program, but you do not want your women's program right now to be successful. And I don't mean that meanly. The women have hosting rights the opening weekend. Okay, it's an odd year in 2017. The women will host the opening weekend. So if both Whitman teams are in position to host, the women have priority, which means the men will have to travel. And I promise you what they will do is they'll move the game to Whitworth. That is what they will do to keep the travel the same. So if you are Whitman right now, you are rooting on Puget Sound women. I know you don't want to. I know you want to root on your women's team. But right now you're rooting on Puget Sound, because if Puget Sound gets to host, then the men at Whitman get to host. Keep that in mind. That is a major scenario here right now that we are going to keep an eye on. Let's see if we got other questions that are popping up that I haven't had a chance to see. Hold on. Here we go. Records versus regionally ranked next week, I assume. Yes, results versus regionally ranked are next week. Similar to the others receiving votes in the top 25, does the NCAA have, but doesn't share, the teams right below 8 through the regional rankings? Yes, Jay, they do. This has happened a lot when it comes to the end of the season when teams are selected. We have had occasions where teams have actually not finished on the regional rankings and been selected to the NCAA tournament. So absolutely, in a vote, there'll be more than 8 in the Atlantic, Central, East, let's see, South, West, etc. There absolutely will be more than 8. And obviously in the Great Lakes more than 9, in the Northeast more than 11. So yes, there are teams, but those teams who are ranked below those numbers are not counted towards regionally ranked opponents. They have to be ranked officially to be a results versus regionally ranked opponent. But yes, there will be a team that has come, not every year, but has come from off the regional rankings. Absolutely. Yep, that absolutely does happen. I think we got some more. Oh, we got some tweets. So let's check the tweets, and we'll get to the women eventually here. If you could give a rundown of the Great Lakes region on the men's side, that'd be awesome. Love the show. Thank you, Alec. I'll do that now. How can Eau Claire be ranked and Oshkosh not? Oshkosh won both meetings as a higher SOS, ranked higher in conference. John, let's get to yours first, then we'll get to the Great Lakes, and I only do that because we were in the Central region earlier to begin with. So, in the Central region, Eau Claire is sitting 5th at 14-6, and Oshkosh is not ranked. So let's go down to their rankings. Luckily, these two teams are pretty close. Oshkosh is 13-8. John, that's an easy one. Oshkosh is 13-8, which is below 667 win-loss percentage with a 596 SOS. At some point, your SOS is going to be a moot point at a 13-8. Eau Claire's SOS is only .024 lower than Oshkosh's, and they've got two losses better. That's why Eau Claire is ranked. Basically. And I know Oshkosh has won both, but Oshkosh's 2 wins over Eau Claire are not trumping a sub 667 SOS or a win-loss and an SOS that is below .03. Pretty simple. I hate to be blunt there, John, but Oshkosh cannot trump the fact that their 2 wins over Eau Claire are cannot wipe out the win-loss and cannot wipe out. It's not a big enough split in the SOS. That's why I believe Eau Claire. Now, here's the trick. Oshkosh next week will now have 2 results versus regionally ranked opponents with Eau Claire and other places, and that will certainly become a factor. And Oshkosh may re-enter this equation with that 596 SOS. But right now, as it stands, I don't see how their 2 wins will trump a 619 SOS compared to a 700 SOS. Is basically where I see that. Let's look at the Great Lakes. I know you got more questions. We'll get to them, folks. I will pick up on the questions. Great Lakes region. Let's see here. Marietta on top, no surprise there. Hope on number 2, no surprise. People might be surprised that Mount St. Joseph is 3. I'm not. Their SOS is a 515, but they're 17-3. Hanover is 15-3, and their SOS is a 524. John Carroll's 14-6. The only thing that's got them that high is the simple fact that their SOS is pretty solid at 579, but they have losses to Hanover and others in this list, and that's why they're down at 5. Worcester is got a 541 SOS at 15-6. Their win over John Carroll, the 549 versus a 579, basically finally puts this in John Carroll's favor. Ohio Northern is next. Ohio Northern is 539 with an SOS, so they're a little bit below everybody. Ohio Wesleyan at 15-6. Their SOS is a 502, so Ohio Wesleyan's doing themselves no favors, including a rough start to the season. And then Denison 9th. They had a great season, but their SOS is a 469. I believe that number has gone down. I believe their SOS was a 480-something at one point last week. So their SOS has gone down, and I think that's hurting them here. Denison's in trouble. They could not afford the 3-game losing streak they're in the midst of. If they didn't have that 3-game losing streak, they're middle of the pack, in my argument. And I think that's in trouble. And so that's one of the big things you got to keep in mind here, to be sure. Checking around to see if we got more emails. I'll go back through the Great Lakes in a little bit more detail here in a moment. Again, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/hoopsville. You can also tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Looking for more questions, and I just don't see them now. The women's regional rankings are out, by the way. We have just released them. Getting to them now. Just bear with me. There they are. We'll get to those as well here shortly. Sorry, I'm doing 3 things at the same time, which is including getting my rankings set so I can answer your questions. And there we go. Let's see here. We'll refresh this screen. Make sure we get these PDFs correct. There we go. And then get those PDFs called up. So if you got questions for us, email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Tweet us at D3Hoopsville. Hashtag Hoopsville. Facebook Live. Facebook.com/Hoopsville. We're streaming there as well. Trying to answer your questions. Gotten some good questions so far. Certainly appreciate it. And look forward to answering more of your questions. If you've got them, send them our way. See if we got anything else going on rankings-wise. Or comments-wise, I should say. Thank you for tuning in. Certainly appreciate it, everybody. We'll refresh our screen, see if we got some more questions. I think that Great Lakes is certainly one of the most interesting scenarios going on. I think for many people, they may be confused by those, and I get it. And I think that's just kind of par for the course. But let's talk about this for a second. For starters, Marietta 17-4, the 590 SOS. I kind of understand why they're up there. Hope is 530 with a 16-3. That's why they're not better than Marietta. Mount St. Joseph is another one. And honestly, some of these, to be honest with you, I think has a lot to do with some common opponents. So let's just let's call some of these up that we have ranked so that we can kind of get through them for you. Bear with me as I click on some buttons here and get these things called up. Again, Ohio Wesleyan, for example, the 506 SOS is doing themselves absolutely no favors. All right, so Denison has a win over Worcester, for example, though they also have a loss to Worcester. They have they don't have much else. They have a win over Ohio Northern, though that is not trumping their position in the rankings right now. That SOS is coming a factor. Ohio Northern's SOS, for example, is a 539, again to that 460. You have a difference of 0.07 between those two teams. And so a win from Denison over Ohio Northern and a difference in 3 games isn't strong enough. Denison's SOS is it's hurting them pretty badly. Honestly, their SOS was better. They'd be ahead of Denison or Ohio Wesleyan. They'd be ahead of Ohio Northern. You could make an argument for them to be ahead of Worcester. The Worcester's SOS being a 540 is nearly 0.08 better, so they'd have to have a significantly better SOS. John Carroll, maybe some are surprised because they have an SOS of 579, But John Carroll has losses to Mount St. Joseph, to Hanover, to Hope, to Ohio Northern. So 5 teams they have wins over, and 3 of them are ahead of them. Let's see. Mount St. Joseph, Hanover, Hope, and Ohio Northern. Sorry, 4 wins over teams outside their conference, and 3 of them are ranked ahead of them for good reason. That's how I see that playing out. So no question there. Trying to understand Randolph-Macon being ranked lower than Virginia Wesleyan when they beat them 2 times. Good question. We'll get to the South region here. Make sure I'm in the South. Nope. There's the South region. Okay, so the South region, you have Randolph-Macon at 7 and Virginia Wesleyan at 4. So let's start with the basics here. Randolph-Macon's SOS is a 5-17 and 15-6. Virginia Wesleyan's SOS is a 5-48, 15-6. So here's where I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess where this may have gone. Yes, so let's just say that Randolph-Macon's got the advantage of beating Virginia Wesleyan. And hold on a second, I'm calling that up to be specific. Come on, sorry, my computer's a little slow here. There we go. All right, so Randolph-Macon has 2 wins over Virginia Wesleyan. But there may be some other common opponents that we have to factor in here. Hampden-Sydney beat Randolph-Macon. Virginia Wesleyan is yet to play Hampden-Sydney, it appears. They got them coming up. So here's what I'm going to go out on a limb and say. Their records at 15-6 are even, and they're 15-6 in overall, so there's no secondary criteria there. So we'll call those even. So neither team has an advantage. Virginia Wesleyan has a 5-48 SOS to Randolph-Macon's 5-17. That now makes that win-loss percentage almost mute, almost irrelevant, because they will play the SOS to win-loss game, and they will tack on at least 2 more losses and take 2 wins away from Randolph-Macon. So now Randolph-Macon is behind Virginia Wesleyan, and then Virginia Wesleyan has obviously the 2 losses to Randolph-Macon, which now enters the equation. But here's how it gets trickier. It gets trickier because other team become factor here. How'd you do against other teams that they're considering, and how are other teams regionally ranked? So LeTourneau, for example, is 503 with a 16-4. Emory is 529 with a 14-6. So this starts to get a little murky. For example, you could probably argue that Emory could go in above LeTourneau, arguably. I think you've got an argument there. And then Randolph-Macon comes in, and then I think that bottom half, they're splitting hairs. I think they gave it to Virginia Wesleyan over Randolph-Macon because Virginia Wesleyan has a much stronger SOS. I think LeTourneau is in the conversation because they have a better win-loss percentage, and Emory's up there with a better win-loss percentage because Randolph-Macon's SOS is so low. Again, Randolph-Macon's SOS is a 5-17. And I don't mean low in general. I mean low in comparison to everybody else's. Again, Virginia Wesleyan is a 5-48, and that's a difference of 0.037. And that gets into that game where that 15-6 win-loss percentage is no longer equal in the eyes of the committee. So I think that's part of it. So here's some insight from the men's committee chair. It says they've ironed out questions from new people and applied a very consistent thought process across the board. Things are harder right now because there are a lot of teams that are similar. There's still a lot of things to be played out. On the other hand, I would say we predominantly stuck with a primary criteria of win-loss percentage and SOS as well as record versus common opponents and head-to-head if applicable. Again, this Virginia Wesleyan Randolph-Macon conversation, you could go into common opponents. The problem is most of those are going to go Randolph-Macon's way. Out of conference is maybe where that goes sideways, but I don't see any off the top of my head that I can see would be common. Kevin Vandestreet continues. Next week we'll have record versus regionally ranked opponent, which will also help. There are a few cases where we had to dig a little deeper to rank one ahead of another, looking at wins versus top 50 or 100 opponents, record versus teams that had 60% of their games, good wins, etc. Let me reiterate that those are not primary criteria, and we don't go to this often, but it's a little like a tiebreaker. In order to seed a conference tournament, you want the record, the head-to-head, but you would do anything to not have a coin flipped. Maybe wins on the road, wins in the second half of the conference, etc. These are things the MIA looks at. So for us, wins versus top 50 teams, Massey and on, are things we'd rather not go to, but we'll dig deep. Now, I don't think he's saying they're using those. I'm reading off the fly. I'm not saying he's using Massey, for example, but I think what they're trying to say is, listen, we'll give any criteria that we're allowed to use to try and break a tie without going to a coin flip. And I think that's where it gets very interesting here for regional ranked opponents. And I think, listen, the Randolph-Macon Virginia Wesleyan conversation is very good because you get it very interesting with Letourneau, Emery as well in this conversation. And I think that's where it gets a little bit crazier. I think you can make an argument for Randolph-Macon being ahead of Virginia Wesleyan, but you can also make an argument for Virginia Wesleyan being ahead of Randolph-Macon. SOS is a factor here, and I think it can't be ignored that Virginia Wesleyan's is significantly higher than Randolph-Macon's. The question becomes Letourneau's is not significantly higher, but they've got 2 win better than Randolph-Macon, and their SOS compared to Randolph-Macon is negligible, which is why Letourneau's behind Virginia Wesleyan. So if Letourneau's behind Virginia Wesleyan, I can understand why Randolph-Macon is behind Virginia Wesleyan. Granted, Randolph-Macon's got those 2 wins, and that's where it becomes a little murky. And I think that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And I think results versus regionally ranked opponents will become a major factor in all of this as we move forward. Again, if you got questions, email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com, tweet us at d3hoopsville. We'll try and answer your questions to the best as we can do. Let's see here. No more questions so far. Again, fire them our way, and we'll look at women here momentarily as well. But yeah, I think the South is a fascinating point, Matt. I think you bring one up there. It's going to be worth looking into. I don't know the exact reason for the decisions, but again, I can see the reasons why Virginia Wesleyan's ahead of Randolph-Macon. I can also see the argument for it not being that way. The 2 wins by Randolph-Macon over Virginia Wesleyan certainly, I think, enter the equation as to why, or as to how Randolph-Macon should be ranked higher. I totally get the argument. The trick is I can't see him above Letourneau because Randolph-Macon doesn't have anything really common with Letourneau, and I don't think Emery plays a factor here as well. So it gets complicated. It really, really does get complicated, and that's par for the course with this, and I'm not overly surprised. I wish I could give you a better one. I've listened to the replay of the marathon over the last week. Amazing job, Dave. Thank you, Jay. I see the women's rankings in 4 schools in the top 6 of the MAC. How? Any update on team number 2 and the coach? Yeah, we'll transition, Jay, in just a minute to women, and I realize we're going to probably go back and forth here. So let's take a look at the women. And hold on, I got to call up the right screen here. Here we go. So on the women's side, and he's starting in the Mid-Atlantic region, Mary Washington Catholic, Christopher Newport Messiah, Scranton, Albright, Moravian, Elizabethtown. So we have CAC, Landmark, CAC, Mac Commonwealth, Landmark, Mac Commonwealth, Landmark. There is a Centennial Conference, and it's not ranked. That is fascinating. I told you the Mid-Atlantic was going to be tough on the women's side, but that's insane. Oh, you know what he's talking? Maybe he's talking Freedom. Hold on. Let me go back to Atlantic. Yeah, that's where we got here. So Atlantic, Montclair State and NJAC, FDU Florham Freedom, DeSales Freedom, Misericordia Freedom, NJAC in Stockton, then Eastern Freedom, Keene NJAC, and Mount St. Mary. Yeah, I don't. Okay, let's look at it. Let's look. Hold on a second. I'm going to need to print this. You're probably going to see me walk away in a second here to pick up the print here. So just bear with me here as I print this so it's a little easier for me. All right, so let's look at the Atlantic. All right, Montclair has an SOS of a 562. FDU Florham has a 590. DeSales has a 562. Misericordia has a 544. Stockton has a 577. Eastern, 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 577. 5 has a 542. I have yet to say a subpar ranking or SOS here. Kane has a 535. That's the lowest SOS I've gotten to. Mount St. Mary has a 480. They're the first ones in there with a subpar SOS. And hold on a second. So SOS reasons, I totally get this. Montclair State's number 2 with a strong SOS, or number 1 with a strong SOS with 2 losses. FDU Florham has 18-3 with a pretty strong SOS at 590. And to be honest with you, if they hadn't lost a game with their coach Park, you probably could argue they're number 1. DeSales has 5 losses, but a 562 SOS. Misericordia has 5 losses and a 544. I don't see any reason they shouldn't be ranked there, Jay. And I understand the order. I don't see anything that jumps out at me. Now, granted, we have a scenario here with some common teams. And by the way, Jay, MAC Freedom versus MAC Commonwealth. Don't forget, there are 2 different conferences. F and C would help me just a little bit here. So let's look at Florham and let's compare them to Misericordia. And they have a win and a loss over Misericordia, so that's a wash. Versus DeSales, they have at least a win. They have 2 wins, so they're gonna trump DeSales there. And against Eastern, and granted their SOS is through the roof, they've got a win over Eastern in a match still to come. As far as DeSales and Misericordia head to head, DeSales has 1 win with 1 to come. So yeah, these rankings make sense to me, Jay. They totally make sense to me. Yeah, and their SOSs are stellar. So I have no. By the way, the Freedom's got 14. Yeah, 4 teams in the top 6. Yeah, I don't see a problem there. The NJAC's got 2 and 3 in the top 7, and you don't get another team until Mount St. Mary with a 480 SOS. Totally makes sense to me. I don't see a major issue there, to be honest with you, Jay. It actually makes sense to me on the women's side. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us. Have not talked Mid-Atlantic. Thank you, Steve. Well, let's go back. Let's talk Mid-Atlantic on the men's side first. Where is my Mid-Atlantic? Here we are. So we're going back to men here. I apologize going back and forth. Just kind of how it happens sometimes. Here we go. Mid-Atlantic. So Christopher Newport's on top, 19-2, the 533. Susquehanna is 17-3, the 554. So the SOS isn't technically inside that .03. So Christopher Newport's 2 wins are going to give it its edge over Susquehanna, who also has 1 more loss. No surprise there. Look at Salisbury at 549. They split with Christopher Newport. Comparing them to Susquehanna, Salisbury's a 549 to Susquehanna's 554, so Susquehanna's got the edge there with a better win-loss percentage. I'm not going to go much further before I'm going to give the nod to Susquehanna. Lycoming comes into play here. Lycoming is 537. If you want to compare it to Salisbury, that's a 537 to a 549. Still, I don't have any qualms here. Swarthmore, 529 to Lycoming's 537. Common record. Don't see a problem there. I'm quickly going to call up, see if either of them faced each other this year, and I don't think they did. Well, Lycoming played Susquehanna and lost, so that's why they're down there. And they didn't play Swarthmore. Swarthmore ahead of Catholic. Catholic is a 551 at 15-6. Well, Swarthmore's ahead of Scranton. Let's start there. So Swarthmore ahead of Scranton. Scranton has a 524 to a 554. Again, I don't have a reason to jump Scranton in that case. Catholic to Scranton's going to be probably head to head. Catholic against Scranton, and they got 1 more game to play. Catholic lost to Scranton, so we're going to start there with the fact that they're down in that count. Scranton's got a 762 and a 524. That's better than a 714. Now, Catholic's 551 is certainly better, but I think the loss and the win-loss percentage there is going to trump it, so I can see why Scranton is ahead of Catholic. And then Franklin and Marshall's got a 502 SOS. I'll be blunt about F&M. They have got to figure out how to play the SOS game. How many times does F&M play this game where they absolutely submarine their SOS? And it's a 502. Let's just look at them and see where we could maybe figure out where F&M's problem is, besides the obvious. They have 2 tournaments at home to start the season. Lancaster Bible this year, not helping them, though it really wouldn't have helped last year. York is marginal. Gettysburg's marginal. This is F&M. That's a conference game. Why is that? Did they play Gettysburg 3 times this year? No. So that's mismarked. We'll have to fix that. Played Lebanon Valley, okay. Played Ursinus, okay. Haverhill, Albright, Carnegie Mellon, Canton at home, Case Western Reserve, and lost to them, by the way. Chase, I got nothing here that tells me why F&M should be any higher. That ranking, those rankings in the Mid-Atlantic on the men's side make complete sense to me. I see absolutely the reasons for those. Now let's look at the women's side. Mary Washington, number 1 at 20-1. And let's go to their SOS. There we go. So Mary Washington's got an SOS of a 550. Catholic has got an SOS of a 559 with 1 more loss. Christopher Newport, Mary Washington and Christopher Newport have split, has a 517 SOS. I can see why Christopher Newport's 3rd behind Catholic, because the SOS difference is in favor of Catholic by 0.042, which is going to wipe out that spread difference. Messiah is sitting 4th with a 518 SOS. That SOS for Messiah not helping them get into this conversation any higher. Scranton's SOS is a 569, but they have 3 losses, including 1 to Catholic. You could maybe argue they could go ahead of Messiah, a 569 to a 518. I think you could argue that. I think the Messiah-Scranton conversation's splitting hairs. If you go with a 0.03 difference, which we have 0.05 difference, I'd argue maybe Scranton deserves to be higher than Messiah. Go to Albright. Albright's a 561 as well, but with an 18-4 record. That being said, didn't Albright beat Messiah? I might have that wrong, actually. Hold on. Yeah, they beat up Messiah once. They got him to go. So, you could argue maybe Albright ahead of Messiah and ahead of Scranton. So I could argue Scranton 4, Albright 5, Messiah 6. Though I'm wondering if the women decided at some point the win-loss percentage is going to trump everything else. So that might be why Messiah is higher. Moravian women have a 593 SOS with a 15-5 record. Now their record's starting to become a problem. And Elizabethtown has a 584. The women definitely lean a little bit more towards win-loss from what I gather. I think that's why on the women's side, that's where it's sitting. I think you could have some interesting conversations there, to be sure. Let's see. Jay gets back to us on Facebook. Oh, John, I see a question from John. John, I'll get to that in a minute. Must be a very top-heavy conference with the top 4. I think the MAC Freedom is a top-heavy conference on the women's side, Jay, but not as top-heavy as you would think. The Atlantic's just a little bit weak, too, especially when you compare it to the Mid-Atlantic or the Great Lakes. But there's nothing else in the Mid-Atlantic besides the NJAC worth talking about. So I'm not that surprised, Jay, to see that many Freedom teams when they're having that good a season. So, yeah, we'll see where that goes. John, I see a question. I'll have to get back to you, buddy. I'm on air. He's got a question unrelated. Again, if you got questions, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. We'll go through some other regions here, men and women. Again, if you want to ask us questions, you can go for it. We've been on the air about an hour. Probably go on for about another half hour and then maybe call it a day. Let's go back to the men. Let's go to the, let's see, where are we not covered? Let's go look at the East real quick. Hold on a second. We're trying to get to East region information here. That's why I have multiple screens, if anybody is curious. All right, so East Region, Rochester #1 at 19-1. No surprise there. They've got a 3-game edge on everybody in losses. Rochester's SOS obviously is going to be good, and it's not as good as I thought it'd be at 520, but 19-1 certainly helps them. St. Lawrence is 534. Oswego is 517, so that edge is going to St. Lawrence, and I don't believe they've played each other. Checking now. They have not. Oh, no, they have, and St. Lawrence won. So that's 2 advantages towards St. Lawrence, so that's no surprise there. St. John Fisher, 539 SOS. Did not play Oswego. Did they play Did the Saints play each other? They did not. So can't go anything there. So we'll look at the fact that St. John Fisher has a 15-5 record compared to a 539. And St. Lawrence is a 534, so that's an obvious decision there. I don't have a problem there. And then if you compare it to Oswego, a 517 to a 539, they're giving Oswego the advantage there just based on win-loss percentage over St. John Fisher at 15-5 versus 17-4. They're definitely giving that to Oswego. Brockport, who has a loss to Oswego, has an SOS of a 519. That's not doing themselves any favors. Then we get down to Cortland, who's a 513 SOS. Oneonta, who is a 533 SOS, but below the Mendoza line of 667. And then Skidmore. Skidmore might be the surprise. They're sitting, but their problem is they're a 503 SOS, sitting at 15-6. So Skidmore has taken too many losses with a substandard SOS compared to everybody else. So I'm not overly surprised to see Skidmore at the bottom there. The East Region doesn't shock me in any way, rankings-wise. Let's go to the Great Lakes. Oh, actually, we talked about the Great Lakes. We'll skip over that. Talked about the Mid-Atlantic, so we'll skip over that. We'll go to the Northeast. No surprise, Babson #1 here. 21 on the season. They're going to get that. Babson's SOS is a 581 as well. Middlebury, to me, no surprise at #2. Middlebury's SOS is a 604. We knew it was going to be tall. So the reason they're sitting behind Babson, for anybody who's curious, is because they have 3 losses. And so I'm not shocked by that. I'm going to go to the Northeast here and just look at who Middlebury played so we understand who their losses are and who their wins are. They have Amherst coming up. That'll be the first chance we'll get a common opponent. So right now we don't have anybody else. Amherst is 3rd at 16-4. Amherst will not be 3rd at 16-4 after this, but Amherst is 4 at 581 SOS. Their problem now is they've actually picked up an extra loss since these rankings were done. And as a result of that, they are going to tumble, I think. I'll get to that in a minute. Tufts is sitting 4. Tufts SOS is a 562 at 17-5. Again, they have a loss to Amherst, so no surprise there. Wesleyan is 16-5. Wesleyan has got an SOS of a 559, and this is where I think it changes. I think Amherst is in trouble. I think Wesleyan has a chance, and it's going to depend, to be honest, on what they did against Tufts. Wesleyan lost to Tufts, so this little trio gets complicated. Amherst beat Tufts. Tufts beat Wesleyan. Wesleyan has beaten Amherst twice. That's where it's going to start getting a little bit more complicated here. Amherst's win against Babson is going to factor into this as well. Other games against Middlebury is going to factor in next week since Amherst will have a game there. This group between 2 and 5, and maybe even 2 and 6, because Williams has a win over Wesleyan, is going to get really complicated really soon. 2 through 6 is going to be interesting to watch next week when other data gets pulled into this. Williams SOS, by the way, a 576. Eastern Connecticut sitting at 7. Eastern Connecticut's got a 561 SOS, but they have a right on the Mendoza line of 667 winning percentage. Mass Dartmouth has a SOS of a 563. A lot of good SOSs in the Northeast. 563, but also on that Mendoza line. MIT has an SOS of, where are they? There they are. 529, the first kind of lower SOS we've seen. That's probably why they're down there. And then Keene State, and Keene State's SOS is a 573, but They're also on that Mendoza line. And then Bates, a 15-8 record is not good. It's below the Mendoza line, but they got a 581 SOS. So SOS driving the ship a little bit in the Northeast. Again, that 2 through 6 slot, I think it's going to get really difficult. I think after 6, there's a drop-off to Eastern Connecticut. But 2 through 6 is going to get really complicated. You're going to start splitting hairs. Again, Amherst beat Tufts. Tufts beat Wesleyan. Wesleyan beat Amherst twice, but lost to Williams. Amherst has beaten Williams. It's going to start getting a little bit complicated in the Northeast on the men's side. Looking to see if you've got any more questions. Email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also join us on Facebook Live, trying to see if there's any questions. Any update on the FDU women's coach since last Thursday? No, Jay, I do not know if Mark Mitchell is back. We'll try and get more information for Thursday night show. Don't forget, we'll be on the air at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Hope you're enjoying the show and you're tuned in. Thank you for taking the time. Certainly appreciate it. Got lots of people tuned in. I think this has been worth it, has it not? We'll probably do this next week as well. Next week obviously gets more interesting. Talked a little bit about the South. Let's go back into the South just a wee bit more. Let's see. So Concordia, Texas is number 2, and that might surprise some people. The 535 SOS and 15-5, 13-5. The conference is just not, or the South is just not as strong as it used to be. Hardin Simmons is a 561. The problem is their 15-6 records killing them. If they had a couple less losses, including recently, they'd be ahead of Concordia here and in pretty good shape. I don't think the South is in great shape to get extra bids, and what I'm reading here now is a warning to everybody in the South as far as especially Texas. Concordia, Texas, who's in the ASC, and obviously in the same conference as Hardin Simmons. So you got Concordia and Hardin Simmons about the only position that I could see an extra bid coming out of it, and it's not even that strong. Virginia Wesleyan sitting 4, but they take another loss, and they easily could slide. LeTourneau doesn't have a strong SOS. They may be in position, but with another loss, they're in trouble. Emory's in trouble. Anybody in the lower half is on the outside looking in right now. So I don't know if we're going to get that many extra bids from the South. And what that will do will be fascinating because Guilford's not really close to anybody except the rest of the ODAC and Emory. Emory has to win the AQ to get in, and they're not in any position really, or they're not in a great position to do that. Concordia, Texas, and Hardin Simmons. One of them is winning the AQ. The other one is not. So arguably that will put one of them at the table if these finish now with Virginia Wesley and everybody else behind them. LeTourneau LeTourneau is leading their conference. The problem with Hardin Simmons and Concordia, Texas are coming out of the same side of the bracket too. So you got 3 teams from the ASC here. We don't even have the SCAC team ranked, and you shouldn't have the SCAC team ranked. So there's going to be 2 teams coming out of Texas, maybe 3. If it is 3, they will have a Texas pod for sure and ship somebody there, maybe like a Claremont Mud Scripps. This gets interesting. I think next week's rankings will give us a little bit more insight on the South. West region, we mentioned Whitman, I think, is in the driver's seat right now. I don't really forecast any reason they would drop out. St. Thomas is in good shape as well, and sitting at 3rd in the regional rankings. They don't have any effect on each other, though. Loris, I think, is going to be the team to watch. Claremont Mud Scripps maybe moves up, but unless they circumvent Whitman, they ain't hosting. And to be honest with you, unless for some reason Whitworth doesn't make the tournament, and at this point they would, Claremont Mud Scripps isn't hosting anyway. Nebraska Wesleyan's in the conversation. That'll be interesting. So is St. John Fisher and Buena Vista, but none of those teams are in a comfortable position to get in. So I think that's, keep the West region is semi-deep, but not terrifically deep, if that makes any sense to any of you. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. UMass men's basketball, 3-1 against NESCAC teams, 2-0 versus top 15 in the nation, Tufts and Keene State. Well, Kenneth, let's start here. It doesn't matter what they are against the top 15 in the country. It's not part of the primary criteria or secondary criteria. They may look at it, but it's not part of the criteria the NCAA uses. They don't even use it in D1. 3-1 against NESCAC teams. Okay. Let's go look at who those 3-1 are. Mass Dartmouth. Go down to them. Bingo. Here we go. So they've beaten Trinity. And I'm going to look at the NESCAC here real quick. So they beat Trinity, who's 4th in the conference. They beat Bowdoin, who's near the bottom of the conference. They 3-1. They beat Tufts, who's at the top of the conference. Granted, Tufts is injured, but that's not bad. But I don't. Where's my third? Am I missing my third? Oh, there. I got it. No, I'm missing the loss. Who'd they lose to? Oh, Connecticut College. And Connecticut College is at the bottom of the conference. So that's a mixed bag, Kenneth. Here's where this will come into play, though, Kenneth. Granted, they don't look at the teams. They look at common opponents. So if we look at the Northeast on the men's side again, Mass Dartmouth at 8. Now let's go look at other data for Mass Dartmouth. And Mass Dartmouth has got... apologize. Here we go. 563 SOS and a 667. Okay, so their win-loss percentage is trouble at 667, plain and simple. In the best of our knowledge, the men's committee under the new SOS has never taken a team anywhere near 667 and below. Emory didn't make it last year at 680. So Mass Dartmouth's got an SOS that's trouble. Win-loss, that is trouble. Their SOS is good at 563. 3-1 versus NESCAC teams. Let me double check something, though. Yeah, okay. So that's good. Yeah. Now, those games will come into play a little bit more next time. So UMass Dartmouth is going to have a win over Tufts and regionally ranked opponents. That's it, though. That's the sad part. So that 3-1 is nice, but that 3-1 is only going to register Tufts. Tufts is the only game that's going to stand out of the 3-1 you mentioned. Keene State. So you say top 15 in the nation. But let's go over something else here. Keene State's not ranked and hasn't been ranked in weeks, Kenneth. So I appreciate where you're coming from there. But that 2-0 against top 15 is deceiving. Is Tufts even in the top 15 anymore at all? I don't think they are at all. So they're 1-0 against a team that's ranked in the top 25 right now. 3-1 against an SCAC team, but only one. Mass Dartmouth has only played one team that's regionally ranked. So next week, Mass Dartmouth is going to have a 1-0 versus regionally ranked opponents with a 667 SOS or win-loss, maybe improved, but I doubt it. No, improved, but not major. I don't think it'll go down, but improved. And a 563 SOS, which is probably going to be closer to 550. Actually, I can tell you what their SOS looks as of right this minute to see if that's actually gone down. Bear with me, I apologize. I kind of go through a bunch of screens here. Here we go. So the SOS for them right now is a 563 according to these. Is that right? I guess it hasn't changed for them. That's peculiar. So, no, Mass Dartmouth doesn't have a ton going for it, to be honest with you, outside of its SOS. Outside of its SOS, they just don't have a ton going for it. Next week, they'll have one win against a regionally ranked opponent. That's Tufts. I'm sorry, they'll have 2 wins because they'll have Keene State. They'll have 2 wins. So, but Keene State's got to stay ranked. They got a 667 result versus SOS. A win-loss. Dang it. 667 win-loss. And a 563 SOS. They've got one thing that's really driving the ship for them, I think. So 8th is about right for Mass Dartmouth, in my opinion. That doesn't blow me away necessarily. Got questions, tweet us, email us, etc. All that information is scrolling at the bottom of the screens. NEAC, Gallaudet in this conversation at all? Well, that's East Region, and no, to be blunt. Gallaudet's not in this conversation. Gallaudet has to win to get in, just like Lancaster Bible. The difference was Lancaster Bible last year had a far better win-loss percentage. If you look at Gallaudet right now, Gallaudet, where are they? Can't find it. There they are. 18-4, so they're 4 losses worse than Lancaster Bible with a 434 SOS. It's abysmal. Gallaudet and the NEAC, whoever wins the NEC is getting in, nobody else is in. Gallaudet's nowhere near this conversation. Not to mention the fact, I don't think they're going to have any games against regionally ranked opponents, period. So that's even bigger criteria that hurts them. Bridgewater not ranked. Eastern Mennonite St. Mary's The conference isn't ranked. Goucher's not ranked. Gwen and Mercy's not ranked. If Gwen and Mercy gets ranked, it'll give them one. But they lost. The conference, as I said, not ranked. That's the rest of the way. So no, Gallaudet is, and I think they know this. I think everybody knows this. Gallaudet is in a situation where they either have to get in or they're out. Plain and simple. And they're in a worse shape than Lancaster Bible. Lancaster Bible had a similar SOS and no losses, so at least that jumped them into the regional rankings. Gallaudet has 4 losses: Eastern Mennonite, St. Mary's, Gwen and Mercy, and Morrisville State. They even lost in conference, which doesn't help them. The only loss on there that could be beneficial is Gwen and Mercy if Gwen and Mercy gets regionally ranked, though right now they're not. So no, Gallaudet's in a world of hurt. And so is the NEAC, plain and simple. Hope you're enjoying this one. We're going to keep, and let me just tweet out here real quick. Hold on a second, folks. Here we go. Just tweeting out that we're still in the air. Just bear with me as I grab one more link. And tweet this out. We'll be on for a little bit longer here. And then we'll sign off and get ready for Thursday's show. If you got any questions, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Email us, etc. I'm sure there's other questions. We'd be happy to try and answer them here on the show. Make sure I don't have anything else coming up. Let me just double check here. Oh, thanks, Greg. I just see some people were tweeting me here, letting me know when things were going on. I got to move that other window a little bit closer to whatever else I'm doing, clearly, which isn't a big deal. I can certainly do that. So those are our regional rankings are out. Let's remember a couple quick things again. Results versus regionally ranked opponents not being used because we didn't have any this time. These regional rankings in the grand scheme of things mean nothing. They don't have a hill or beans about anything. Because you have to be ranked in the last weeks 2 and 3 to get anywhere with this, and so on and so forth. So let's just remember some of that stuff. Let's also look. Let's see. I don't know if we got through. Did we go through all the men? So the men we've gotten through. Let's just look at the women. We talked about the Atlantic Central regions. Wash U at 18 and 2. I don't think that's surprising. A number 1 pick. Let's just go through it though from the Central. Here we go. So Wash U at 18 and 2, their SOS is a 632. Compare that to Oshkosh with a 534. This is a slam dunk number 1 pick. Whitewater is a 522. Wheaton is a 587. They're the only one near Wash U, and it's still not close by 0.05. And they've got 2 more losses. Illinois Wesleyan is a 613. You could make an argument here with 613 to Wheaton, but I think Wheaton's got a head-to-head, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just double-check that real quick. Wheaton, there we go. Wheaton against Illinois Wesleyan, lost, and 1 to play. So I think maybe here the difference between Wheaton and Illinois Wesleyan. Illinois Wesleyan, again, an SOS of 613 compared to Wheaton's 587. You're inside that 0.03 window, so it's not going to change everything else. And Illinois Wesleyan's got the win there. You could maybe argue that Illinois Wesleyan could be ahead of Wheaton, but they may be going on win-loss percentage there. Women tend to look at that a little bit differently. Chicago's SOS is a 639, so that's Trump in there, 14 and 6 there. Cornell has got a win-loss percentage of 525. That's why they're down where they are. They're behind Illinois Wesleyan and Chicago for that reason. Concordia, Wisconsin's got a 483 SOS. That's why they're down there. And then Elmer's at 502. So we're kind of in the central region. You see not only win-loss percentage taking a roll here, but it's got to roll along with an SOS to a point. And I think Wheaton, Illinois Wesleyan's where you could argue that. Then it flips over to where the SOS takes a little bit more precedent right after Chicago. Cornell, Concordia, Wisconsin, Elmer's not rewarded for their records, though Elmer's SOS 502. Yeah, not reward for their win losses because their SOS isn't as good. In the East region, SUNY Geneseo, no surprise here, undefeated at 21-0. They're going to be number one. On top of that, SUNY Geneseo's SOS, though is not an impressive number, it's 487. That could get them in trouble. Though 2 years ago, McDaniel got in with 2 losses, so you got to figure Geneseo will get in. Their SOS is going to finish closer to 500, but not much closer. Ithaca has an SOS of a 519, so it's not hugely different, just barely on that .03. So that kind of gets to that 3-game difference there. And we talked 2 games with a .03, so that still gives SUNY Geneseo the advantage. Rochester, who's struggling as of late, now 15-5 with a 594. That's why they're behind Ithaca. SUNY Poly is sitting with a 474. That's why they're not ahead of Rochester. William Smith's got a 516 with a win-loss of 762. I think they're giving Poly the advantage there with the win-loss percentage because the SOS you would think would give that to William Smith. Nyack School at Lancaster Bible's in the conversation with a 460 SOS. I think they're starting to play the win-loss percentage a little bit here. NYU surprisingly ranked at 12-8. They're not going to get in with that. But NYU has got a 610 SOS. So their SOS is helping them there, but they're not going to get in. And Hartwick, right on that Mendoza line at 504. So the bottom of the East region on the women's side is a game between SOS and win-loss and other data, to be sure. Quickly going to check to see if we got more questions while we're just tap dancing along through the East here. Looks like we may not, and we'll get going here shortly once we finish this up. Great Lakes, this might surprise some people to see Ohio Northern on top of Thomas More, but that's going to come down to SOS to be sure. For Ohio Northern, their SOS is a 546. For Thomas More, their SOS is a 519. So you're going to give that advantage to Ohio Northern. Not overly surprised there. DePaul with that one loss with an SOS of 523. Not doing a ton there to impress anybody. So DePaul is in a pickle there with a lower SOS. Hope at 17-2. Their SOS is a 549. Let's compare that to DePaul, 523, inside that .03 line. So I think that's why Hope will fall behind DePaul in this scenario. And granted, I'm not looking at head-to-heads or anything else right now. Rose-Hulman, surprisingly, maybe higher than some people expected, but with a 552, I can understand that. Trine's in the conversation with a 496 SOS. That's why at 18-2, they're so much further down. Have a better SOS, they'd be ahead of Rose-Hulman. But not ahead of Hope, I don't believe, because Hope's got the win over them. I think that's going to trump them just a little bit. Carnegie Mellon, who's having a great season, but has taken a few too many losses. They're at 15-5 with a 618 SOS. I think Carnegie Mellon here is in a scenario where they're just taking too many losses in a very strong region. You take Carnegie Mellon to another region, they'd probably be ranked far higher. Baldwin Wallace, the same, 524, though their SOS isn't as strong. And then Calvin's in the mix, but their SOS is a 480, which is killing them. So that has a lot to do with what's going on there, to be sure. Let's go to the Mid. We talked about the Mid-Atlantic on the women's side. Let's go to the Northeast. Amherst number 1, Tufts number 2. Obviously, how the teams kind of played already and have a win to that advantage. But just so you know, Amherst has an SOS of 616 and Tufts has an SOS of 600. So everything's pretty equal there except for the head-to-head. So obviously Amherst is 1, Tufts is 2. Mass Dartmouth on the women's side. Sorry, can't find them. There they are. 555 SOS. That's certainly going to put them behind those two ahead of them. Husson is surprisingly at number 4 here. Husson is 17-2 with a 521 SOS, so certainly not shabby, and that's probably why they floated up a little bit here. Are they better than Bowdoin? Well, a 569 SOS to a 521 says no. Bowdoin has... I'm surprised, actually. I think Bowdoin could have gone ahead of Husson. Granted, I am not looking if they have played each other, and that's going to play a factor, as it did with Amherst versus Tufts, and we're looking into that now. Husson, and we're comparing them to Bowdoin. Excuse the yawn. They didn't play Bowdoin. Well, no, they did and lost, but that game took place after the regional rankings. After the regional rankings came out, so that will change. I suspect next week we'll see Bowdoin move ahead of Husson, though I could have argued Bowdoin ahead of Husson in the first place. So that might be a little surprise with them at 4. Babson sitting at 5 with a 602 SOS. I think you could have argued them over Husson as well. Husson, again, their SOS reminder of 521. Now, listen, Husson's SOS isn't horrible, and that might be why they're sitting 4. If they had a sub 500 SOS, they wouldn't be here. Sorry again for the yawn. Connecticut College, SOS is 582, but they're 16-6. This is where the losses start to add up. Eastern Connecticut at 569, but 14-6. We understand why Connecticut College is ahead. St. Joseph's of Maine, they've got 18-2, but a 476 SOS. This is where that SOS now starts to play a role in submarining teams. WPI, 493 SOS. Middlebury women have a 565 at 15-6. So head-to-head, some other factors coming in here, and then Springfield. So not overly surprised. Maybe a few changes there. I probably would have had Bowdoin ahead of Husson. Maybe even Babson ahead of Husson. I think the bottom teams are negligible. That being said, the bottom teams aren't getting in the tournament anyway, most likely out of the Northeast. But it's good to keep in mind. South Region, Texas, Trinity, Texas over Texas, Dallas over Maryville over Lynchburg. It's an interesting region. I think the South Region's always tough. Plain and simple. Extremely difficult. Trinity, Texas. Lost to Texas Lutheran last time they played. They haven't played since. So their record is... Actually, they've lost twice to Texas Lutheran. It's not reflected here. Hold on. I need to double check when that game took place. Well, that's interesting. So we got a little bit of an interesting scenario here. Texas Lutheran has beaten Trinity, Texas twice. They do not have Trinity, Texas. Oh, I'm on the men's side. Hold on, folks. That would explain things, wouldn't it? I apologize. I was wondering why nothing was adding up in my head here. Trinity, Texas beat Texas Lutheran. They've now split with Texas Lutheran. So that's why Trinity, Texas is up. Trinity, Texas's SOS as well is 513. Nothing to be blown away about. Texas, Dallas has a 581 SOS, but 2 games back. The problem is Texas, Dallas also has a loss to Trinity, Texas. So I see why Trinity, Texas is up. Maryville. Basically, it means Texas, Dallas had beaten Trinity, Texas. They'd be number 1. Maryville is 490 SOS despite a 20-3. They're riding their win-loss percentage there. Lynchburg is 17-4 despite with a 557. It's getting a little bit interesting in there. I think the women, I think in the middle to bottom, the women certainly have some arguments, and I'm not going into every bit of the criteria, not because I don't want to, but I just don't have it in front of me, and I just simply can't. I think that's going to do it. I think for the most part, a lot of these regional rankings make some sense. There are some questions. Again, the first week doesn't mean much. Second week certainly means more. I'm not shocked by some of these rankings. I am maybe got some questions about some of these rankings. I think the women are being consistent. I think the men are even somewhat consistent, believe it or not. But yeah, I think you got some questions, and I think it helps us dive into the numbers just a little bit there. South region on the men's side, clearly starting at about 4, they're starting to split some hairs. I think on the we talked about on the Northeast side, that 2 through 6 slot is going to jumble up quite a bit next week when we look at them. And again, a couple things we see here. Whitman men are certainly in a solid position to host, but they got to keep rooting on Puget Sound women and hope that doesn't change dramatically. I don't think it will. You certainly don't want it to. If it does change dramatically, that's going to have a major impact. So some interesting things. I'm going to be fascinated to see how this all plays out. But I think overall we see some consistencies from the committee, and nothing shocking me necessarily about these rankings. Just checking the email one more time, make sure we don't have any other questions. Let's see. Hearing from the Women's Committee Chair, Bobby Morgan, she says first week's rankings seemed to go well in most regions, a few long talking points in a few regions, but overall the committee felt the RACs did a solid job in most cases. So the women, not much to report off the top of their head. Men certainly are already diving deep into criteria to figure some things out. We'll see how this all plays out. I think it's pretty solid. It gives us something to work from. Yes, we're going to be splitting hairs. We could certainly split some arguments with some of these things, but overall, I think it's not too bad. We're going to talk more on Thursday after we dived into the numbers just a little bit more as well. Remember, we're on the air at 7 o'clock Eastern Time live, and you can also listen to the podcast or watch us on demand whenever you want. We'll also be back on Sunday. I apologize for not being on the air Sunday for Super Bowl Sunday. I've been wiped out with a cold and exhaustion, partly because of that marathon a week ago Thursday, but partly for other reasons. We were already tired going into the marathon, so the marathon just kind of exasperated some things. Battling a cold, as I said, and battling some exhaustion in general. So I apologize for not being on the air Sunday. I don't think we really missed much. But we will be on the air Thursday. We're working on finalizing our guest lists as we speak. Forgive those watching who notice the camera doesn't look as good as it normally does. We will try and figure out why our camera has ceased to operate and work from it from there. Again, if you have questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville as well. Appreciate you joining us. I certainly appreciate you taking the time for this one. We'll be back on the air next Wednesday as well, as we'll talk more about the regional rankings then as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday night. Until then, have a good rest of the week, and we'll certainly look forward to seeing you on the air, or seeing you join us on the air Thursday night at 7, Sunday night at 7, and next week for another regional ranking show. Goodbye, everybody.